I'm Tyler from the ResearchHub team. Previously did my PhD in biomedical engineering. I was like a neuroimaging researcher, computational sciences. And today, joined with a pretty awesome panel here. We have John Chavez from the 501c3 nonprofit DMT Quest, pretty much pushing the bounds of what it means to fund interesting and novel science. We have Fadel Zaidan, who was the inaugural endowed professor of the Stanford Institute. And he's also the director and the co-founder of the Neuroscience Institute at UCSD. And we also have Nick Denemy, who's a rising star postdoc at Stanford University, studying with Boris Heifetz and Robert Malinka, right? Yeah, awesome. So that was a quick intro, but I'm curious if you guys want to talk a little bit more about what you do or what energizes you about your careers.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. Like I said, DMT Quest is an organization focused on really pushing the boundaries of the human potential, looking at altered states of consciousness, endogenous psychedelics, and we also produce films to go ahead and, I guess, distribute the message of whatever research we're funding for social impact. So we're a full spectrum organization that, looking to create significant social impact for many decades to come. And I feel as though there's a lot of high utility research that we'd like to fund, like some of the stuff that Fadel Zaidan is doing with the Wim Hof method, metabolic waste clearance from the brain. Very exciting stuff. And we just have a very wide array of a pipeline of research going on right now. And I'm excited to work with ResearchHub.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Tyler. Thank you, ResearchHub, for inviting me to be a part of this really cool event. My name is Fadel Zaidan. I'm a professor of anesthesiology at UCSD, neuroscience director of our Center for Psychedelic Research, and I do also study what happens in the brain when people become kinder. We're particularly interested in seeing how changes in consciousness can alleviate suffering and appreciating the biological processes that can support that. So a lot of our work deals with appreciating the biological substrates of mindfulness meditation in the context of chronic pain and other conditions, and now we're running a couple of clinical trials that are imaging-based that are looking at the effects of psychedelics, different types of psychedelics, on pain and health. So really stoked to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, my name is Nick Denemy. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a postdoctoral scholar in the psychiatry department, and my main focus is trying to understand the basic mechanisms of psychiatric disease and how therapeutics work on a fundamental level. So I was trained as a pharmacologist and a physiologist. And many psychiatric drugs that we have today, we don't really understand why they work. And so we're trying to look at, the nuts and bolts of things like rapid-acting antidepressants like psychedelics, and trying to unravel their mechanisms so we can develop better drugs and make them more scalable and sustainable. So really excited.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. So the theme of this panel is alternative funding, and part of that comes from the need to, I think, fund more bold research. So I was curious to get your guys' takes on, when do you think realistically is the right time in a researcher's career to fund or try and get funding for a really bold project? Is it early career when you're kind of trying to make your splash? Or is it more late career once you've achieved tenure and you kind of have more flexibility?
Yeah, I guess I can go since I have tenure. That's a really good and thoughtful question. I think the answer is you want to do both at the same time. You want to go for bold, and then you want to go for the work that's going to, lead to NIH funding. What I tell my trainees is to target the NIH funding ideas and grants, and then kind of in the background, you're kind of going to also ask the bold questions, and they sometimes don't go into the 12 pages that you're allotted in your R01. But for me, since I started studying meditation, I felt like that was, I was explicitly told 20-something years ago not to study mindfulness meditation because it's like frou-frou and not rigorous. So we kind of upped our game, and I feel like we did a pretty good job of, utilizing rigorous methodologies to understand how mindfulness works. It's not a placebo, etc. And now that I do have more job security, although it's likely some kind of delusion, is that I could start asking more far out questions. And so, yeah, but my former answer is what I would tell trainees. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I mean, we actually had this conversation earlier today, and I think the answer is always right now. I think the worst that can happen is someone can say no, but you just keep trying. You know, I think every time I thought I needed to wait to become faculty to, you know, look for funding for a project, I was wrong. And I actually probably waited too long. So yeah.
Really hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great attitude, and I agree totally. John, I'm curious if you have comments too on, like, as a funder, like, how do you prioritize like a bold research as opposed to something that you know is going to hit like a guaranteed stepwise change?
That's a complicated question in certain ways. I look for things that can be applicable to the regular person in terms of the impact. So, yeah, I think they go hand in hand for me. Like, you have to be bold, but you also have to have a pathway towards application. I think that's really important.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. So Nick and Fadl, you guys were just awarded some funding from John's nonprofit. I was curious if you could give the audience like a quick overview of the projects you guys are planning and kind of the experimental outcomes you're hoping for.
Yeah, so big shout out to John for having this vision. He's really brought me into this world of incredibly deep, kind of sometimes elephant in the room questions that wouldn't be funded through traditional avenues like the NIH or NSF. Our project was kind of born out of some conversations that John and I have had. And we wanted to, so there's a system that's been relatively newly discovered called the glymphatic system, and it goes into effect when we sleep. It clears out what's called waste clearance mechanism. So sleep recovers, and we think that this clearance occurs in a certain system within the brain, and we have the technology to be able to measure it. So the question is, can the Wim Hof breathing technique elicit improvements in well-being and sleep through changes in the glymphatic system? And so I was lucky enough to post this project on ResearchHub, and John and some others here in the room even put down a non-trivial amount of money towards the project for it to be carried out. And then the coin went nuts. So I had a $150,000 goal, I think, to do the pilot study, and then like it went well over 300, and then, you know, which was really amazing because I'm not used to this. I lose money regularly. It's not a skill that I have or enjoy. So that's what's transpired, and it's just been like eye-opening to see how outside of the box thinking can really lead to potentially seismic progress in science and health promotion. So kudos to you guys for breaking those barriers. Do you want me to hold it for you?
No. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to thank John and you know, everyone at ResearchHub for really, again, this goes back to the question. You know, I thought I needed to wait to be a faculty member to start the project I'm going to tell you about. So, again, I work in preclinical psychiatry, and you know, we use rodent models to test novel therapeutics and to try to understand psychiatric disorders like depression. And it's very difficult because, you know, we can't speak to the mice or the rats, and it's very hard to know, you know, the type of psychological problems that they're having and whether or not some of these drugs are actually working. And I have been a lifelong hobbyist in keeping chameleons. And so this is going to get a little weird for a second, but I promise it'll make sense in the end. So I've kept chameleons, and I've studied them for a long time, and most people believe that chameleons change their color for camouflage purposes, typically. The answer you'll get, but it's actually more based on mood and communication. So their typical, you know, mood will cause very complex color changes, and you can actually, you know, predict which chameleon will win in a fight based on their color changes. It's actually a language for them. And I've always thought that this could be a very interesting way to basically quantify behavioral states in animals that would give us better access than we currently have in mice. And so, you know, again, this sounds absolutely crazy. I thought, you know, there's no chance that I can talk about this until I become a tenured professor, you know, in public. You know, and I was talking, you know, to John and Jeff, and they were telling me about ResearchHub, and I brought up my major, you know, first project that I started working on. I said, hey, I'm working on how psilocybin changes, you know, synaptic learning rules in the cortex, and they're like, oh, I don't think that's bold enough. And I was like, well, what about chameleons? And and can we measure their color change patterns and see if we can actually test drugs or look at behavioral states, and maybe we'll have a better model than mice. And so none of this would have ever happened without ResearchHub, without DMT Quest. And so I just want to thank all of you.
Yeah, and that study is insanely cool. So thank you for doing it. And Nick, I'm curious too, like, did you think you could get funding for that in a different route? Or like what prevented you from applying for funding for that kind of project? Is it just like career pressure or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, your career pressure, not really, being able to communicate it, I think, in a very sophisticated way without taking a really long time. So one of the things that ResearchHub really helped me with was creating a short video that everyone could understand, that I could share with my mom, and she knew exactly what I was doing with chameleons, and she was really excited about it. And so, I just didn't know where to start. I actually went down and trained with a professor who runs a chameleon lab in South Dakota, and that I got the training, and then I came back, and I was like, okay, well, I'll wait 10 years to become a tenured professor, and then see where this goes. But then people got really excited about it after we made those videos, and it turned out that the people that run the animal centers at Stanford were also huge fans of chameleons, and they gave me a lab space, and I guess I just didn't expect everybody to be as supportive as they were, and so, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And actually, a big shout out to Ted in the back who's running these.
Yeah, as far as Ted, yes.
He's the one that made the
He's the
video,
filmmaker.
actually.
Thank you, Ted.
We mentioned. So maybe just to get into it real quick, like if Fadl and Nick, if you guys could walk through like the process so people understand of like, how was it that you got funded through ResearchHub? What were the actions you had to take?
Yeah, so just briefly, I mean, it's the same actions you would take when you're writing a grant, right? I had to, formulate my ideas and come up with a budget and, make a readable grant that people could understand and evaluate. And then I put that as a pre-registration on ResearchHub. And it gets peer-reviewed and looked at the same way a normal grant would. You just don't have to go through all of the, administrative hurdles of copying and pasting, the equipment list that you've taken from 5 other grants and, all the 96 pages that, yeah. I mean, so really, I just got to focus on the science and come up with a really good plan and a budget and put that on the pre-registration and then, get feedback and, I mean, eventually people actually funded it and wanted to support it. So.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off of that. It was a really brief proposal. It was a couple of pages, and it wasn't esoteric. It had to be written in a way that was going to be compassionate and empathetic, where everyone could appreciate it. So that was a breath of fresh air, to not write like a 150-page application with 5-inch margins and no space and et cetera. So that was fun. And then the comments that we were so with ResearchCoin, you get money, you get crypto if you review these protocols. And so I had like, I don't know, 10 or 15 quote unquote reviewers, and no one was mean. That was so incredible that, people were kind and constructive, as opposed to, hopefully there's no NIH reviewers or study check in this room, but, it could be really debilitating on your well-being to read those NIH reviews. And so it was like kind of this alive, organic process. I continuously changed the protocol as a reflection of these comments, and it kept getting stronger and stronger. So I was really almost, I can't believe I'm gonna say this, welcoming these criticisms. And so that was really cool, because I also learned a lot. Some of these folks were like real deal experts in glymphatic system processing and imaging, and they really informed my understanding of how to approach it. So that was really cool and unique. And another really big, if I may, difference is it took a couple of months max to get the funding, as opposed to, with NIH, like never getting the funding, or just taking forever. It's like 6 months, and now I have like 4 grants that are in play that are, I don't have no idea when they're going to be reviewed again because the government closed. So, so in those aspects are really non-trivial, and they're significant, and it was a really cool and unique way to navigate this decentralized scientific platform.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate you saying that. And that is kind of one of the things we're trying to focus on with the funding feature is like the turnaround time. We try to think about it like the progress of society is innately coupled to the progress of science. So when you have like a 1 to 2 year funding delay, that just adds lead time to when it's going to make it to like the general public. So really glad to hear you say that. And yeah, I guess John, I'm curious too, like what made it interesting to fund on ResearchHub for you as a funder? Like were there any problems that you were running into trying to fund elsewhere?
I think one of the main things that drew me to ResearchHub was the fact that you guys are trying to accelerate peer review process. And I've been frustrated because we fund research and it takes like 2 years to go through that peer review process for some of these papers. And I'm a filmmaker, so we have to wait to go ahead and get these things through peer review to make a film on it. And it just takes way too long. So that's really what drew me to ResearchHub initially. In terms of the funding, it just seems that it's a no-brainer to add value to another layer within the science ecosystem. And I see that how ambitious ResearchHub is on many fronts, so I just wanted to support.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, John. So Nick and Fatal, you mentioned you guys shared a pre-registration as like the first phase. So for the audience, like a pre-registration is ideally, it's enough experimental detail that's shared open access such that a third party could independently replicate the work. And the idea is that you share this plan ahead of time and then peer review is done before results are gathered. But like we've heard feedback that that's like a little uncomfortable for scientists to like give their bread and butter like in the open before it's even received funding. So I was curious for you guys, how was that? Like, was it scary to put the work out there without the funding fully being completed?
Yeah, it was. It was. It goes against every convention that we have as scientists to when we submit our work and create a design. You design an experiment. You're basically creating a recipe that could, that recipe could lead to millions of dollars. And so it was awkward to post my design and these ideas on, in a public forum where what we call in science, you have a high susceptibility of being scooped. Where I've had ideas taken, and it's, which doesn't mean that it won't happen in an NIH study section review, but it seemed like it was more risky doing it this way. But after you kind of submit it and you start to see, the process and then the funding coming through and how quickly it happened, I wouldn't hesitate to do it again.
Yeah, in my case, there was probably less than 3 people in the country or the world who had the capabilities to do this research or interest, and I knew all of them personally, so I wasn't really worried about it. But I will say, the NIH has a similar system called the NIH Reporter tool, and you do have to publish your abstract for your grants, when you get funded. And I think, at least in my field, I'd have a pretty good chance of scooping you based on the detail in some of the abstracts. So I don't think it's actually that much different. And I was able to get some really good feedback, actually, especially on the aim. So there was a particular peer reviewer who pointed me in the direction of some work on cuttlefish that actually I didn't know about. And it actually changed the way I was thinking about doing some of the experiments. So I think there's an upside there that is unexpected sometimes.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear that they were actually useful and not like a barrier. And just for context too, when we give these peer reviews on the pre-registrations, it's not to gatekeep. Like John can make his funding decision independent of whatever the peer reviews say, and they're totally optional to implement. But the idea is to give like context to the audience and to the author about how things could be more defensible. So yeah, maybe last question about this, and then I'll try and open it up to the audience, is how was it to have crowdfunding for scientific research? Like John, specifically for you as a funder, for getting more exposure to additional funders, and then for you guys as researchers, it kind of puts you in a position where you have the chance, but also the pressure to go and find people to fund your research and kind of put your livelihood out there. Yeah, curious what you guys think.
Yeah, it's great to expose these projects to a broad array of people that could potentially support it. I'm looking to bring in other big dollar donors into the platform, hopefully next year. I think that once little of the kinks get worked out, then we can make a big push for you guys. I just think that this space is right, and now is the time. So I'm just excited for the future.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the process. It was really fun for me. It was really fun to be able to send your friends and family an approachable summary of what you're up to and say, hey, this is the research I'm doing. I think people thought it was cool. And I just think the whole process is exciting, and it's the future in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah, and then the other side of it was I was able to copy and paste the link of the proposal that was on ResearchHub and send it to other potential funders. So there was kind of like this scalability and this user friendliness about this approach that, may have led, there was several anonymous donors that may have led to supplemental funding. So yeah, it was really, for being in the game for so long, it was really a breath of fresh air to go about it this way.
Awesome. Okay, actually, one more question, and then I think I'll open it up. I want to talk about communication of scientific research. For you as a funder, John, and then also for you guys as researchers, how do you see the role of communicating to scientists, which is traditionally done through preprints and publications, versus the more general audience? Is that something we should care about or optimize for? Or, yeah, what do you think?
I think it's a fundamental moral necessity to do that. These findings and these data and these results of our clinical trials are paid for tax dollars. And, the journals are esoteric. They're not user-friendly, and they're, targeted for a scientific community. So it's essential for us to go out and give talks and engage with the community for free, and share our results and disseminate our findings in a fashion that anyone and everyone could appreciate. So yeah, I think it's critical. It's still bonkers to me that NIH funding can lead to a new technology, a new product, a drug, a technique, and that professor that was funded by tax dollars leaves the academic institution and then makes millions of dollars on this discovery. I can go down this soapbox, but in reality, it should be free. So the very least we can do is share the information as high and wide as possible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the only way to build, trust from the general public is to share science, and having, a framework and a team and people to support you like ResearchHub has. Most scientists don't know how to communicate their science very well, right? And having that kind of support is extremely helpful, and I think it's essential. And yeah.
Yeah, communication is everything. I love what you guys are doing, and I guess so. You guys are on the front end and streamlining the communication through this process of getting it funded and all that, and then. From my side, we do films on the results of these studies and trying to make millions of people see them so they can have social impact, because research without media it's not going to make the impact that you need.
Yeah, that's actually specifically why I asked the question, John, because when I was in my PhD, the dream is that you have some awesome paper that makes it to an audience that actually cares about it. So I think it's insanely important.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why film is so important in this entire space, and I feel it can drive even more funding in the future when we have tens of millions of people seeing our films, and then they know about ResearchHub, and then it just feeds into the ecosystem.
I love it. Awesome. So yeah, we actually have a little over, I think, 10, maybe 15 minutes left, so plenty of time for audience questions. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, great job. So Fidel and Nick, this is maybe for you. So really two questions. One, I'm just wondering if this public attestation of your work and maybe the social currency you're getting, which is probably different than normal clinical research, if you see that as a positive and maybe actually putting a public marker that then perhaps helps you not be scooped, or at least have some kind of social currency. Just intrigued about that. But then also IRBs. So we kind of went through this thinking with the research project or the project we have on ResearchHub, but how do you handle IRBs and mapping conventional IRB process to what I think is a non-conventional process here?
I'm going to hand the IRB back to him after I answer the first question. But yeah, so absolutely. I think it's a similar thing that you can do with preprints, where you can put you're publishing your work, right? It's a public disclosure of your work, and again, I wasn't worried about scooping because I would love someone to come help with this project and work on this too. But yeah, I think that's a huge benefit. I also think one example where something you might not think about, but I'm also involved in conservation for these animals, and bringing public attention to this is actually a way that we're trying to help eventually raise money to do things like fund conservation. So here for the IRB.
This is the IRB part. For NIH grants, I write the IRB before I submit the grant. I do the pilot study. In fact, my first experiment was funded by the Mind and Life Institute, and the president of Mind and Life is back there, Suzanne Bond. You guys should talk to her. An organization founded by the Dalai Lama and a bunch of neuroscientists, and they awarded me $15,000 as a postdoc, and that 15K led to pilot data that led to 15 million. So with ResearchHub, I'm writing the IRB now after I got the funding because it was such a far-out approach. It was such a novel question that I just put the work out there, and it was successful. Now I'm going to do the experiment. I didn't submit pilot data, although we had pilot data. It just wasn't to that particular question. I hope I answered it. So it's a mixed answer. I would normally write the IRB before I submit an NIH grant, and I would run a small version of the clinical trial that I wanted to get funded, but not for ResearchHub.
Would you not engage in an IRB institute, or would you just do it all yourself?
Oh, we have an IRB at UCSD. I sit on the IRB. I'm a committee member.
This is good. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, I'm down with the IRB.
I was wondering what hoops you have to go through to get your universities to accept the money, because you don't have the overhead costs negotiated, you don't have all the ethical approvals negotiated. So what's involved there?
That's a fantastic question. They definitely want indirects, but if the policy, they definitely do. But if the policy is clear by the donor or the funder that there's 0% indirect rate, then the university has to acknowledge that, and they have to accept that. Our chairs and our chancellors, they understand how difficult it is to survive as a researcher in this current environment, or the environment just period. So I think they have the foresight to see that this pocket of money that may not have indirects could eventually lead to millions of dollars in indirects. Yeah, it's a super good question.
So I'm representing Stanford University, and I've worked
I've heard
with
of it.
Nick. Yeah, and Renee as well. And I've worked with Nick and Jason Tucciaroni to accept gifts from the ResearchHub. And we did have to go through a lot of hoops. And Stanford's philanthropic indirects stand at 8%. And since ResearchHub is a 501c3 and it's given as philanthropy, we can take it in at 8%. So it's not about the indirects, it's about the method through which it comes. I have a second question, however, for John, and maybe for you too, Fidel. John, do you ever work, what's your experience working directly with clinicians or basic research scientists, giving the funding directly to them versus going through ResearchHub? Because I think that's a really important question to ask, and is a very distinct feeling that different donors have in terms of access. And then I would ask the same question of Fidel, because I'm sure being as established as you are, you have a lot of philanthropic donors one-on-one. And I'm wondering how I know they're two different things, but how do you value each relationship, and how does it advance the way you're thinking about your research?
So the question was, what's the main difference in terms of funding through ResearchHub or directly? When it goes directly to the researcher, it's a straightforward thing, right? There's nobody knows about it publicly, and it just takes place, and the researcher gets to do their thing. But when we go through ResearchHub, then the public can see it. It's much more publicized. I think it adds value to this platform that I really want to support and see be very successful. So that's the main reason why we're doing it. It's the process is getting a little bit more streamlined over time. It was pretty rough at the beginning, getting the funds into ResearchHub, but now that's getting smoothed out, and I think they're going to continue to smooth it out further. So I think it's not going to be any issue for funders in the future. Yeah,
it's just incredible. It's a good question. So I've traditionally been funded by the NIH and some foundations. This gift approach is relatively new for me. I'm still weirded out and can't believe it. Like, it's just incredible when someone's just kind enough to say, I believe in your lab and your question, and here's the money. So that's fantastic when that happens. The ResearchHub approach is when you don't have the $2 million funder, and you have an idea that you truly believe based on preliminary evidence and your theory, and you want to flush it out, A, publicly, and B, crowdfund in a way that where other people hopefully can share that enthusiasm and support in more incremental fashion as opposed to the $2 million gift or whatnot. So it's more of a breathing kind of organism when it's going through the ResearchHub open access decentralized approach.
It's mainly about so if it had to go through a different platform, I probably would just do it directly to the researcher. But I've been working with Pat and Tyler and the whole team for a while now, and I really like their energy, and I feel that it's the future of science, so we need to see it happen.
Yeah, thank you. And one small clarification too, ResearchHub is not a nonprofit, but we have a partner that is a nonprofit that handles all the gift transactions. Yes, endowment, correct. Yeah, other questions? Russ?
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. So my question would be, I was really interested about this word scooping and that people are afraid. And I was thinking from a funder's perspective, isn't it the best thing that can happen that you support a project and then 2 labs actually are doing it? And isn't it like one problem of scientists that, I think it's like a personal thing, right? You work on something and then you want to be the first one who publishes it, but in a big picture, right, as a society, we probably want that 10 people scoop you, and everyone either shows the same or different things, and then it can be discussed. But isn't this one of the misalignments that really goes wrong in science, that people are afraid that they get scooped and then maybe their career will suffer? But actually, I'm just curious from a funder's perspective, would you care about that, or wouldn't you say it's even actually better? The more attention it gets, the more people want to do exactly the same research because they find it valuable. This actually improves the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Fadl, but I do agree with him that it would be the best, right? Because that means the researcher was able to find their own funding, right? And then it just increases the whole market. So I agree with you completely.
Hi, Mario Malichki, also Stanford University, but a little different angle if I can. We've seen that bioRxiv and medRxiv have now sort of joined and promote AI peer review for all the submitted preprints. I was wondering, would you two be willing to share, because this was also sort of a public review, but did you consult any AIs for the review of your projects when you were preparing them? Because a lot of people, I think, will do that now as a first step before they make it public, be it a preprint or be it a grant proposal.
Are you asking me, did I get a AI to write the protocol?
Not write it, but give advice, because we heard both of you got very good advice from external peer reviews. I was wondering, compared to if you have done it, we like to compare now the quality of the peer review that we get from many automated systems to the experts out there. And in the same line, if I can pose the question to the ResearchHub, are you thinking of having integrated AI peer reviews on top of the external ones?
I do use AI, and I use it a lot to help me code. So it's an incredible pipeline creator. I find for writing, I love writing, by the way. It's like kind of why I'm in science. I love to write. I find that AI in the space of neurobiology and scientific design and methodology makes a lot of careless errors. So while I do use it to format grammatic and errors and flow, I don't use it to generate ideas, A, because I like doing that, and that's part of why my job's not a job. And B, you can tell it's AI. It's still beta to me. I can review a manuscript, and I see all those M dashes, and I know, I know that an AI agent wrote that. And I can't review it and say stop using AI so much because it's not like necessarily unethical, but I will say you have too many M dashes.
Yeah, just quickly, I did have an AI do a peer review of my pre-registration, and I know that ResearchHub has, they have to moderate because some AIs do get in there. I got a 5 out of 5 stars, and I would certainly request that AI as a peer reviewer next time. But yeah, it was just too nice, and I haven't explored, other more serious models. But I would be open to it, completely.
Yeah, just real quick too, the ResearchHub Foundation, like specifically Jeff, is working on a pretty good AI for peer review. It's kind of internal use. And in the crowd too, we have reviewer 3, who's also working on some automated peer review. Yeah, maybe we could take one more question. Brian, I saw you had your hand up earlier.
All right, question for John. What are you looking for? Because every funding agency, whether it's a foundation or the government, wants a certain kind of return on what they're giving out. Is there a particular thing that you're going to evaluate, or are you just viewing this as like a one-off and whatever happens? I'm just kind of curious where you're.
It's social impact, in terms of making communicative bridges. So DMT Quest is focused on endogenous psychedelics. It acts as a communicative bridge between the whole mystic aspect and hardcore science. And I feel like that's very important and needs to be communicated through data. And that's really what it's about. And it's a long-term game. We fund a lot of very basic foundational research at University of Michigan, UC San Diego, UC Davis. And we're just looking to create a narrative that's going to, I guess, continue for decades in terms of a better understanding of why do we have endogenous psychedelics in our system? Is there a therapeutic value to that, in terms of altered states? So it's pretty wide. Yeah,
Well, thanks so much, guys, for being on the panel. This was really awesome. Let's give them one more round of applause.